Good day to you. Hope you're having a wonderful day. We are going to read the second half of Matthew chapter 8. We're going to look at that. And as we go through it, I want us to look at or notice the reactions to Jesus, how people are reacting to him. Now, we looked at the first half of chapter 8 last time, and we noticed how Jesus was willing to help those in need. So now, let's just look at this second half, see how people react to Jesus. This first part, the first couple of verses, is taking place after Jesus healed Peter's mother-in-law, and she served them. The implication being that they had a meal, so this is later in the evening after that. Matthew chapter 8, verses 16 and 17. When evening had come, they brought to him many who were demon-possessed, and he cast out the spirits with a word, and healed all who were sick, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by Isaiah the prophet, saying, He himself took our infirmities and bore our sicknesses. So see, again, I want to remind us, Jesus is known for healing. He's getting quite famous for that. People are bringing him the demon-possessed and the sick because he's also casting out demons. And they're reacting to his ability to heal and cast out demons. They're reacting to the power of God that's in Jesus, that he's wielding. And this is how they knew Jesus was from God. And Matthew mentions here the prophecy from Isaiah, another example of how Jesus is the Messiah. He was taking their infirmities and their sicknesses away. He was removing those things. So now let's look at verses 18 through 22. That's Matthew chapter 8, verses 18 through 22. And when Jesus saw great multitudes about him, he gave a command to depart to the other side. Then a certain scribe came and said to him, Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go. And Jesus said to him, Foxes have holes, and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Then another of his disciples said to him, Lord, let me first go and bury my father. But Jesus said to him, Follow me, and let the dead bury their own dead. Now, Jesus, remember this is in the evening, he sees this crowd gathering, and he decided that he and his disciples would go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee. See, that verse does not say the other side of what, but it is the other side of the Sea of Galilee. They're in Capernaum, which is on the northwest side, and they're going to, I shouldn't say sail, but they're going to get in their fishing boats, and I imagine they did use sails, and they're going to go across the Sea of Galilee to the eastern side. That's the point of this. That's the point of that verse saying he gave a command to depart. That's where they're going to go. So this crowd was gathering, reacting to the Lord's miracles, right? They were being drawn to him. Now, Capernaum is Jesus' kind of home and headquarters while he's in his ministry here, even though we do see that he roams around. Him, the disciples do roam around quite a bit. It was a small fishing town. Okay. Now, when they go to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, they're going to go to a place called Gadarenes. There is another name for it that I struggle with, and we'll deal with that when we get to that. But it's also the country of the Gadarenes. So notice this scribe came to Jesus and offered to follow him wherever he went. Now, there's some things I want us to note about this man. First of all, the man was a scribe. In their culture, he was educated, respected, had knowledge of the law, the Old Testament. The man called Jesus teacher. Now, the scribes were the teachers of the law. They were supposed to be the experts. He was acknowledging Jesus had superior knowledge of the law. So he called Jesus teacher. This was a high compliment, an honor to be called teacher by the scribes. It is the Hebrew equivalent of rabbi. When they say rabbi, they're saying teacher or master, one that you would follow and learn from. Now, Jesus knew this man's heart. And so the question here is, did he understand the life he was volunteering for? Would he stay the course? Jesus wanted men who could withstand the trials and the idea of roughing it and a lot of walking around. And, it was not going to be an easy life. He wasn't really saying that he had no place to rest. That was not to be a literal thing, but he was expressing the difficulty of following him in his ministry. So it's not going to be a comfortable thing. You're not going to be like me. You're not going to be home sitting on the couch every evening, right? Sitting back with your coffee and supper. That's not the way it's going to be. So it's not going to be that easy way. And it is part of the narrow path that it is difficult. It's very rewarding, but it is difficult. So the scribe's initial reaction to Jesus was good. He wanted to follow, but was he committed? We need to realize it's not easy to follow the Lord. At times we will be uncomfortable. We will be challenged. God calls us to do things that we don't want to do. Just like Jonah did not want to go to Nineveh, he didn't want God to forgive them people. He was very mad that God forgave them people. He didn't want to do that, but in the end, he did. God also calls us to do things that we're not very good at. You look at Moses. Moses is like, look, I'm not the guy you want. I don't speak good. I'm just not very good at these things. I'm not the man. That's basically what Moses was telling God, and I'm wildly paraphrasing these things, but that's what it was. And God's like, no, you are the guy. You are going to do it. Aaron's going to help you. End of story. Get on with it. So that's what ended up happening in both those cases. Both of these men were called to do things like in Jonah's case, something he didn't want to do. Moses was called to do something that he just didn't think he could do. I imagine he probably wasn't comfortable doing it. So just the way it is. So Jesus challenged this man, this scribe, and we don't see the scribe's response. Now, the implication to us when we read this today with our modern thinking, the implication is that maybe he didn't follow Jesus any further. Maybe he just gave up and walked away. We talk about counting the cost of following the Lord. And it seemed like this man responded to Jesus hastily and glad, but without thinking about what was really involved. So initially he had that good reaction, wanting to follow Jesus, but the end result appears to be that maybe he was not fully committed to following Jesus. And we must count the cost of following the Lord. We must understand that while it is wonderful and fulfilling and rewarding, it is also difficult and we can be persecuted. We have to understand what is required and be willing to give up some of those worldly things that we are accustomed to. Now, in verse 21, we see that it says another of his disciples. So in that verse, it's implying that both the scribe and this second man are actually already, at least in the moment, disciples following Jesus. So that's the implication to me, okay? That's how I read that. It says another of his disciples. So that seems to imply that the scribe was following Jesus at least to this point. So, anyway, next, this second man, one of Jesus' disciples, not a stranger, says, "Let me go, Lord, let me go bury my father." Now, this request sounds reasonable, again, to us at first glance in our modern day, our modern era, and Jesus' response may seem harsh in that light. But be aware the way this is presented, his father was probably not dead, maybe not even dying, and it has to do with the customs of the time. This man was wanting to leave and go fulfill all his duty to his family, his duty to his parents, and then only after his father passed would he then leave to come follow Jesus. So he would follow Jesus later, perhaps many years later, maybe months, maybe years. We're not really sure. But he would wait and fulfill his duty to his family, and he would wait for his father to die, then bury him, and then come follow the Lord. So he was asking for a kind of extended leave of absence. You might remember Jesus is only in ministry for a few years, so this was just not going to work or happen. So this disciple's reaction, if I was going to sum it up, his reaction to Jesus is, not now, Lord, but later. Later, Lord, I will. So Jesus' response to him, when Jesus responded to this man, he was encouraging him to leave his spiritually dead life and follow now. It sounds harsh, but Jesus was really telling him, look, leave that spiritually dead life and follow now. Don't wait. There's no reason to wait. Remember how Jesus called Peter, James, John, and Matthew, and they just responded immediately. They just came and followed. They were committed. They were ready. Sometimes we need to move when we feel called by God. If we delay, we may never accomplish what God has for us. Other people are caught up in their dead lives without the Lord, and we should follow Jesus and be alive in the Spirit of God. Don't let the opportunity to follow the Lord get away. Choose the better things, the important things of the Lord. It's too easy to say, I'll do it later, and then, you never get around to it. It just never happens. Later never comes, and then it's too late, because too late always shows up. And when it's too late, it's too late. So here, again, we don't see this man's reaction to Jesus' response. The implication to us, the way we read it with our modern ears and thinking, is that he did not continue to follow the Lord. I stress it that way for a reason. If we look at Matthew chapter 8, verse 23, the next verse, talking about Jesus, now when he got into a boat, his disciples followed him. Now, there's no mention of these guys not following. There's just this mention of his disciples followed him. It doesn't say that those two guys, that most of his disciples followed him, or that all but them two followed him. So there's no clear-cut answer, no way for us to know for sure. Did these guys, did they get the encouragement? Did they take Jesus' advice? Or did they stop following him? It's hard to be 100% sure. I know we read it and we think of it a certain way, but because culture and time is so different, it's hard to be 100% sure. If there's some other accounting of this, by all means, let me know. When I look at the end of Luke chapter 9, these events are recorded in much the same way, and the implication again to us is that these men maybe did not follow Jesus further, but it doesn't say for sure. So I'm not sure how much of that is a cultural difference, and maybe in our modern times we are reading into the text by accident. So we want to make sure we don't that we don't do that on purpose, that we kind of try to draw ourselves back and say, okay, but what does it actually truly say? Because it's not 100% clear whether they followed him or not. They may have taken Jesus' correction and encouragement to heart, and they may have continued to follow. We don't know for sure. We want to be careful we don't add to the text. We don't want to speculate a lot. So when we read that and we say, oh, well, they quit and they walked away. Well, maybe, but we don't know for sure. Don't know 100% for sure. So just wanted to mention that. It's important that we try to stay true to the Word. So let's read the next verses. Matthew chapter 8, verses 23 through 27. Now when he got into a boat, again, we're talking about Jesus here. Now when he got into a boat, his disciples followed him. And suddenly a great tempest arose on the sea, so that the boat was covered with the waves, but he was asleep. Then his disciples came to him and awoke him, saying, Lord, save us, we are perishing. But he said to them, Why are you fearful, O you of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a great calm. So the men marveled, saying, Who can this be that even the winds and the sea obey him? Now, I want to give you a full disclaimer. I compared Matthew's version, which is kind of short, with Mark's and Luke's version. So I may mention some things from their accounts, but overall I'm going to stick with Matthew's here. So everyone is in the boat and they are crossing the Sea of Galilee. They are heading east and really southeast to the Gadarenes. A great storm comes up with big waves that are filling the boat with water. Jesus is asleep in the back of the boat on a pillow. And remember, it's very late in the day or evening, and it may even be dark at night. And Jesus has been healing and teaching. As a man, I'm sure he was tired. He experienced all these same things that we experience. I'm sure that he was tired. I'm sure the disciples thought, just let him get some rest, But now they're afraid of the storm. They wake Jesus up. Save us, we're dying, Obviously, to us, if Jesus is sleeping in the boat, you are not dying. Everything's going to be fine. Jesus would not be asleep in the boat if there was anything to worry about. But they didn't know what we know now, right? It's kind of unfair to judge them based on what we know now. So what's the first thing Jesus does? He reassures them. Why are you fearful? Basically saying, there's nothing to be afraid of. And Jesus calls them, "Oh, you of little faith." And I believe he's teaching them, even in that fear, why do you not have faith by now? Then Jesus calms the storm and the sea is back to normal. And what was their reaction? How did they react to Jesus then? Well, they marveled. They were amazed and surprised. And this time they were amazed and surprised, not just enthusiastic. They were like, wow, what kind of man is he? Who is he that he can command the storm, the winds, and the sea? So I'm sure we also would have been shocked and amazed. Of course we would. Even if I saw that today, I would be shocked and amazed. But I want us to look at some verses in Psalm 89. I'm surprised that Matthew did not mention these verses as another proof of Jesus, but let's look at Psalm 89, verses 8 and 9. O Lord God of hosts, who is mighty like you, O Lord? Your faithfulness also surrounds you. You rule the raging of the sea. When its waves rise, you still them. If they had remembered those verses, I think they would have had a better, clearer understanding of who Jesus is, right? They would have been like, oh, well, he is the Lord, right? They would have understood better. And, we have to give the disciples a break. We're looking back on this with a lot of knowledge after the fact. For them, it was very different. They were living through all this Jewish tradition and what to expect. And, the Jews were really expecting a warrior king type of Messiah. And that's not really what Jesus was. And that's not what he was supposed to be. Because, we're told in Isaiah, he's going to be that suffering Messiah. But nonetheless, there were misgivings and misunderstandings about what to expect. So let's continue. Look at Matthew chapter 8, verses 28 through 34. When he had come to the other side, again, Jesus, to the country of the Gergesenes. Now that's the other word. I have trouble with that word. I'm not even sure if I'm saying it right. But that is the same. It is the same idea as Gadarenes. It's maybe a different name in that Gergesenes might be a town, a specific town or something, and Gadarenes is the country. Not 100% sure on that. I think that may be correct, but nonetheless, it's still in that same place. And if you looked it up on like a map like I have, you would see that it's on about the middle of the Sea of Galilee on the eastern side. It's a little town there. And I say little town, I imagine most towns back then were not huge. Probably huge towns were the exception. So to the country of the Gergesenes, there met him 2 demon-possessed men coming out of the tombs, exceedingly fierce, so that no one could pass that way. And suddenly they cried out, saying, What have we to do with you, Jesus, you Son of God? Have you come here to torment us before the time? Now a good way off from them there was a herd of many swine feeding. So the demons begged him, saying, If you cast us out, permit us to go away into the herd of swine. And he said to them, Go. So when they had come out, they went into the herd of swine, and suddenly the whole herd of swine ran violently down the steep place into the sea and perished in the water. Then those who kept them fled. Now this is talking about the herd keepers, those who kept this herd of pigs. They fled, and they went away into the city and told everything, including what had happened to the demon-possessed men. And behold, the whole city came out to meet Jesus, and when they saw him, they begged him to depart from their region. So finally they arrive at the Gadarenes, and they meet these demon-possessed men. Now, another full disclosure, I did look at parallel passages in Mark 5 and Luke 8. So if I mention some things that are there and not here, just understand that. Again, Matthew's version seems to be more of a summary. So anyway, see the reaction of these demons. They know who Jesus is. They seem to know it is not time for them to be gone yet. Like you're here before the time. Don't be bugging us, right? Anyway, they know he has authority over them. They also know they were in the wrong, or they're doing something wrong, and Jesus was going to cast them out. They say, oh, if you're going to cast us out, well, they knew, in my opinion, I guess, but nonetheless, I think they knew they were in trouble. So Jesus let the demons go into the pigs, and the pigs drowned in the sea. Now you may ask why let them go into the pigs? No reason is mentioned. I really don't even have a decent guess. Someone else might. But I will say that pigs are unclean, and God's people were not to eat pork at that time. So could that have been a factor? Maybe. This does not mean that Jesus intentionally destroyed the pigs, but even if he did, would it not be worth those pigs to save the souls of these two men? I think it would be well worth it to save even one person. But here, Jesus saved these two men from demon possession. So what is the reaction to Jesus freeing these men from demonic possession? What is the reaction? Well, the pig herders, they run and report everything, and they do include the story. They tell that the pigs were destroyed and that the two men were freed. So they're not holding anything back. They're telling what happened. The townspeople come out. Now, I'm assuming the owners of the pigs and the town leaders, probably all the important people came out to see what was going on. They saw the men who had been freed from the demons acting normally in their right mind. Now remember, they had been fierce. They had prevented people from going around these tombs because that's where they had been. That's where they had been living. So when they saw these men free of those demons, they were afraid. Their reaction was fear. It's like they thought Jesus was going to be some source of trouble. And maybe due to the loss of the pigs, maybe they thought he would be a problem or someone who would cause them trouble. Unsure exactly, but their reaction was fear, and they begged Jesus to leave. Now, Jesus does not stay where he's not welcome. And we see in chapter 9, verse 1. So he, Jesus, got into a boat, crossed over, and came to his own city. He went back to Capernaum. This was a very short trip. Now, one of these men, and you can read about this in the other accounts, wanted to follow Jesus, but Jesus wouldn't let him. Jesus told the man to stay in his country and tell everyone what God had done for him. Mark's account says the man did that. He did as Jesus said. So this man's reaction was gratitude and recognition that Jesus was the one to follow. Now, in closing, I want us to look at those verses in Mark chapter 5, verses 19 and 20. However, Jesus did not permit him. That was that man asking him to follow him, but said to him, "Go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you, and how he has had compassion on you." And he departed and began to proclaim in Decapolis all that Jesus had done for him, and all marveled. Now, Decapolis was this place in the Gadarenes there was about 10 towns that were fairly close together, and they called it Decapolis. I may not be pronouncing that exactly right. I think that's correct. Deca is 10 basically, and I think the Apolis or Polis is kind of city. So it's like the 10 cities or 10 towns. Anyway, I want you to notice that all marveled. And at the end of verse 20, it says, he departed and proclaimed all Jesus did for him, and all marveled. These people knew this man. They knew he had been this crazy dude living at the tombs, right? And his testimony was strong for the Lord because they knew him or knew of him. So we should always be ready to tell others how the Lord has helped us, how God has blessed us so much. Our reaction should be one of praise and prayer and a good testimony like this man. So I want to thank you for listening. Hope you have a wonderful day. May the Lord bless you and keep you safe. And remember, God loves you.